Thank you so much for coming out. I know the weather's not been the best today, but you know, COVID happens, so why not rain on today? I just wanted to thank you guys so much for coming. There's a lot of people I want to thank, but I'll be kind of going through that as the program goes on. I want to keep this pretty quick, but first, I really just wanted to thank Robin Young, who's a good friend of mine, who actually helps, whether she wants to admit it or not. She's very helpful with the nomination process for this marker that we're here to unveil today. And I also like to thank Scott Green and his wife for letting us put the marker in front of his building. Of course, we couldn't do it without him either. And I'd also like to thank Westchester University Professor Janet Nesselrode, who without her I wouldn't have even known about this very important moment we're here to commemorate today. So on the program, we were supposed to have Philip Zimmerman come from the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. Unfortunately, he couldn't come because of the weather, but we have Senator Tim Carney here, who is kind of a twofer for this, because not only is he a commission member with the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, he is also the state senator representing MEDBURG. So with that, I'll turn it over to the senator.
Wow, great. Hi, everybody. Hey, Kevin. We're going to do a twofer. Phil couldn't be here today. He's in Lancaster County, which is under about 3 inches of rain today already. The storm seems to be scooting us, just going north of it, which is a wonderful thing for us. So happy to see so many people here could come out and be here today. So on behalf of Governor Wolf and the members and the staff of the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, the Commonwealth's official history agency, and my fellow Commissioner Phil, who couldn't be here today, but I congratulate you on dedicating the newest of the more than 2,500 historical markers that have been erected across the state. These markers chronicle the people, the places, and the events that have made this Commonwealth notable. The Historical Marker Program, which had its beginnings in 1946, is now one of the most popular programs in the Historical and Museum Commission. Each marker establishes an important link to the past, whether through military history, history of government and politics, influential artists or performers, education, science, medicine, environment. There's even a slinky one over by Upper Darby. The list is as long as we are creative. Historical markers speak to us and to future generations about the many and diverse events and topics that, when woven together, become the Commonwealth's rich and diverse heritage. This marker is one that will make those who read it stop and think and wonder what and what if. For many of us who were around in 1971, I wasn't here, but the U.S. Attorney was, we will remember who we were and perhaps what we were thinking. For younger people, you'll wonder, what were these events like, and how can I put them in a more fuller context? Some may even inspire others to explore the event further. I hope that they will. Personally, on my own notes, those were Phil's, but I'll say that I'm happy to be here today to recognize the 50th anniversary of this historic act of civil disobedience, which exposed J. Edgar Hoover's nefarious counterintelligence program and the courageous group of citizens who carried out this nonviolent action. They literally blew the whistle on a disturbing plan to sabotage American social movements, cause harm to communities, and even to assassinate Black Panther members and blackmail Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In doing so, the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI demonstrated solidarity with all marginalized American communities and defended our First American rights from abusive government. They also opened the long-standing truth about government surveillance to new generations of Americans and blew open a can of worms that we are still dealing with, both in the post-9/11 and the post-January 6th insurrection world. With domestic terrorism and gun violence at unseen levels, many Americans want to see greater restrictions on what others call essential liberties, like gun ownership. Americans are still asking one another, what is freedom? Is it getting to wear a mask or not, depending on your choice? Is it getting to voice your opinion about it? Is owning a firearm the ability to live your life without fear of violence? Is freedom inhibited by an act of government, or is freedom protected and maintained by it. That Americans are still debating government surveillance and civil liberties today just shows the historic significance of the Citizens Commission's actions. Because ultimately, our democracy makes our response to these questions fluid, evolving, adaptable to our own circumstances and our own feelings. In 1971, people in Delaware County changed the debate when they pushed back against the FBI and exposed secrets to the public. As Americans, we must own our complex history and the ever-changing historical debate over our American ideals. I'm proud that a piece of that history is coming here, or was formed here, and it's now going to be marked. And we celebrate marking it for all generations to learn and consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Carney. Next on, we have Media Borough Mayor Robert McMahon. Of course, we couldn't be doing all this today without the support of Media Borough, especially their council, their mayor, and also, of course, Mike Green from the Public Works Department, who was very helpful and very nice to allow his crew to put in the post and the sign for us today. So, Mayor McMahon.
Okay, well, welcome to everybody's hometown. Between Frank Daly and I, we've been mayor for 40 years. Frank's over here. And Frank, thanks for coming up today.
You got 30 of them, Bob.
Okay, that might be it though. Everybody remembers March 8th, 1971. All of us, not all of us, but most of us were watching the fight. I know I was watching the fight. I watched probably all of them. I don't remember where I watched it, whether it was on TV or down at the arena, but I just don't remember. And I was focused on an important event, that fight. Unbeknownst to all of us, the heist of the century was happening at the same time, right here. Immediately, a group of citizens retrieved over 1,000 pages of documents to expose COINTELPRO, which is the FBI spying program on American citizens. While we do not praise the crime, the outcome of the burglary is significant, is a significant turning point, shining a light on a dark period in our history. We are everybody's hometown, and we want to make sure everybody is able to live their lives free from unlawful government surveillance. So today, we're unveiling the historical marker. There are over 23, you said 2,500. 2,500, right? 23, yeah. All right, 2,500 markers around the state, but it's only the second one to be installed in media. The marker commemorates an event hidden in plain sight. It will stand in immortality, local history. And it will be a permanent reminder of how important this town was to shaping a government of surveillance laws. Protection from illegal surveillance started here in media, and we're proud of that. Thanks to the Historical and Museum Commission for approving this historical event. Thanks to Kevin, thank you. Stacy Olkowski for leading the way in planning today's events. And thank you to the burglars, who I guess we're going to see them shortly. You won? Raise your hand if you won. Step up behind me. I didn't know they were here yet.
We're sneaky down there.
Okay, now I'm going to let Yeah, don't say that too loud. Thank you, everybody.
So, in doing the research, there were at least two primary sources that I looked at to get this nomination going. First was the documentary 1971 by Joanna Hamilton, who is here with us today. And second was the book, The Burglary, The Discovery of J. Edgar Hoover's Secret FBI by Betty Metzger. So I think it goes without saying, without these two people putting so much work to commemorate this event and doing so much research on it and bringing it to another generation of people to know and understand this story, I mean, we really wouldn't be doing this right now. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Betty Metzger.
Thank you, Kevin. It's so great to see all of you, and so you're even standing in the rain, and I'm very sorry that you have to do that, but so glad that you're here. It's wonderful to see this new chapter added to the story of the media burglary, to see it honored in this way. I want to thank Kevin mainly for getting this great idea that when he realized that he spent his entire life here but didn't know about this event, and decided that there ought to be a way to have a marker, something that if other people walked by here, they would know that something really important, something that changed history, happened right here on this spot. So deep gratitude to Kevin for starting this and taking it through all the bureaucratic steps. And also thanks to Stacy Orkowski, who I'm meeting for the first time, but have talked to many times, and who spent so much effort making things come together. I mean, who would have ever thought that people would like to have a tour of the old FBI office? Obviously, Stacy did, and a lot of people do. Thank you very much, Stacy. And thanks also. Pardon?
We don't have a microphone, sorry.
Louder.
We don't have one.
I'll try. I'll try. And I'm going to have to compete with the rain, I guess. I'm sorry. I'd just like to point out some extraordinary things about what they accomplished and what they messaged to them. You know, thanks to the first congressional investigations of intelligence agencies, we learned from Hoover's FBI officials testifying under oath that the FBI, as they conducted all of these awful, illegal, violent acts against Americans, never even considered the ethics or the legality of what they were doing. And they were certainly not about to reveal any of these secrets. And that's why it's so important that this group of people was able to come together and do what they did. Neil Welsh, who may be a familiar name to some people here, he eventually became the top FBI person in both Philadelphia and New York. And he said that if this burglary had not taken place, and if the revelations hadn't been made by the burglars, he thinks that the FBI would have continued for many years, if not forever, as it was under J. Edgar Hoover. And that changed all as a result of what happened here. There was no oversight within the government. There was no there were no whistleblowers from within. That could have never happened. And journalists did not report on J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, except for stories about how great he was. I'd like to make sure you know who these people were and are. They were all people from this area. Two of them are with us today. Keith Forsyth. It was Keith who broke in that night. That was his assignment. Now, he did not bring with him today the finely crafted locksmith tools that he developed for the occasion and that he thought would do the job. And he also did not bring the crowbar or jack that actually did do the job that night. And also with us is Bonnie Raines. Bonnie had a very special task involved with the burglary. Bonnie did inside casing in advance of the burglary. And she did that by making an appointment with the head of the office and posing as a student from Swarthmore who was writing a paper on the FBI. And she is not wearing the fine knit cap that she wore that day to hide her beautiful long hair, and nor is she wearing the gloves that she wore that day, even as she took notes and was looking around the room to see if there was an alarm system. There was none. Others who wish they could be here today and cannot be are Bob Williamson, who lives in Albuquerque, Ralph Daniels, who lives in Marin County in California, one person who cannot be named but who has told her story, and Judy Feingold, who also lives in New Mexico. And two people we miss very much, Bill Davidon, who got the idea for the burglary and who died just 2 months before the group became public in 2014. And John Raines, Bonnie's husband, who died in 2017. As we honor what they accomplished that night, I'd like to draw attention to their courage. As you can see, they're so normal looking, and they're good to be with, so that it is easy to forget that they did something that most people would find impossible. It's hard to even imagine the risk they took, the risk of losing their freedom for decades. And they did it to find the truth and to give the truth to the public about a very important institution. They tried to see if it was trampling dissent, and they found out that indeed was happening, and much, much more, and much, much worse. I've had the privilege of working with them as sources now for many years. I had no idea who they were when I first received the files from them right after the burglary. But now I feel at home with them, and every once in a while when I'm with them or when I happen to be thinking about them, I pause and I feel the same amazement that I felt when I first learned what they had done. And I ask myself, are they extraordinary? Do they possess qualities quite different from what the rest of us could possess? Or does what they did demonstrate that many of us could also find the capacity to summon courage to confront enormous injustice when it might mean losing our freedom? Because humility is also a quality that each of them possesses. I'm sure they would say no special qualities did they possess, that we too could do what they did. I hope they are right. They also would say that the simplest things count, that you don't have to break into an FBI office to make a difference. And just one more thing as you stand in the rain. Often when I reflect about their extraordinary courage, I think of what Nathan Raines, the youngest of John and Bonnie's 3 children at the time of the burglary, says near the end of Joanna Hamilton's wonderful documentary, which, as Kevin said, is showing here this evening. Nathan was 2 at the time of the burglary. Many years later, when he was interviewed for the film, in a voice that was full of pride and amazement, Nathan says of his parents, they risked everything. They saw an injustice and they decided they were going to act on it. Thank you.
All right, so I know the rain's picking up a bit, but we'll try to wrap this up pretty quickly, but no rush to anyone. As Betty said, the Citizens Commission was really just a bunch of ordinary people, scholars, academics, a taxi cab driver. These were just 8 ordinary people who just wanted to show what their government was really doing, that they knew, they had a hint was true. Obviously, we could not be here today with Bill Davidon or John Raines, but I'm so happy that we have their closest relatives with them here with us today. So first, I'd like to introduce John Raines' wife, Bonnie Raines.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
I'll try to use my third grade teacher voice.
Good plan.
My job is to set the context, so I am the contexter today. I never expected to be talking about the FBI burglary 50 years later. So much has transpired. But it is a pleasant surprise that those events resonate in some way today. I am so honored and touched to see this wonderful historical marker go up outside this infamous building. Our democracy is still emerging, along with the need to protect its most precious principles and values. It was in a community of shared values and resistance to destructive motives by some in authority that led my husband John and I and Keith and others in Philadelphia to our actions as the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI. We also miss John. His contributions were rollicking. He drove the so-called getaway car. So I want to pay tribute to John and to our fearless and brilliant leader, Bill Davidon, whose daughter is here with us today, I'm happy to say. I think John and Bill are really enjoying this moment from the great university classroom in the sky. The late 60s and early 70s were tumultuous times. Our country was coming apart. The protests against the war in Vietnam and the draft, and against the government leading that murderous campaign, were front and center here in Philadelphia. The usual ways of confronting power and its abuse were not working. Rallies, marches, petitions, maybe some of you were in on some of those activities at the time. John and I became increasingly frustrated and angry. Citizens' voices were not listened to. The government and the military were lying to us. Hoover's FBI was everywhere. Spying and intimidation directed at his so-called subversives, scheming to break the peace movement and the black empowerment movement. The challenge was how to strip away the secrecy and reveal that abuse. No one in Washington would do their job to hold the FBI accountable. Hoover was either beloved or feared. After the burglary, we had to depend on courageous journalists and editors to get the truth out to the public. Ultimately, we had to depend on Congress to investigate the FBI and to call for reforms. Our most significant discovery coming out of the congressional hearings was the COINTELPRO program, a decades-long secret program of widespread dirty tricks and subjugation of the rights of citizens, alarmingly close to secret police. We all know that today's dangerous climate calls for heightened vigilance and activism. So let's carry on.
And finally, our last speaker is Sarah Davidon, who is the daughter of Bill Davidon, who was the one who coordinated this whole burglary. So I think it's very suiting that we end today's program with Sarah. What you got? There you are.
So I'll try and make it a little shorter than I thought I would because you all are very wet. But I just want to give you a little bit of context about my dad, because all of the facts you know and you'll see tonight in the movie. But in 1971, when I was 3 years old and my dad and my sister, who couldn't be here, was 6 years old, we lived in this 100-year-old house out on the Haverford College campus. And I looked it up the other day and I saw that March 8th, 1971 was a Monday. And so I was wondering if that morning my dad might have walked me to preschool. because, or he might have walked my sister up to the elementary school bus stop. Because in addition to being an activist and a scientist, he was also a dad. And he wanted to do everything he could to create the kind of country that he wanted his children to grow up in. As you may know at this point, my dad was a professor at Haverford with a scientific mind that made him a firm believer in fact-finding and used evidence to solve problems. So in his activism, my dad used many of the same principles of his science, believing that evidence rather than conspiracy theory were critical. So we could actually use a lot more like him today. After my dad died in 2013, as Betty mentioned, just a couple of months prior to all of this coming out, I remember finding an archived interview from 1997 with the American Institute of Physics, in which my dad was asked about distribution of the FBI documents obtained from media, and my dad said, in response to a question about, were you involved? What was your role? And this was 1997, so none of this had come out at that point. And my dad said, well, there was a burglary at the FBI office in media, and my role in it has never been made public, and I won't make it public now. And then he said, but I was sort of known as somebody who was involved. There were mailings from newspapers, and then when individuals from different newspapers wanted to get more material, he said, I became a contact person, and people would contact him and say they'd like information, and then my dad would try and get it, and often they would somehow end up with materials. So my dad said, so I was clearly involved in some way, but I'm not going to make it known today how that was. So this was back in 1997. So thank you, Betty, for finally bringing this forward. Just a couple of more things that are really important to me that I want to share with you about my dad. When my dad was requesting documents from the FBI through the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, to see what they had about him, my dad said all of the stuff that they gave him through his FOIA request said nothing about media or MEDBURG. And my dad said that he was convinced that they must have other things in their files concerning media. So when he was talking to this guy at the FBI trying to get files, he said, check under what the FBI refers to as MEDBURG and see whether my name comes up there. And then the guy from the FBI, or the FOIA guy my dad was talking to, I don't remember exactly who it was he was talking to, said, he called my dad back later and very enthusiastically said, oh yes, your name came up lots of times. And then all of a sudden this new packet of materials was sent to my dad. So I was asked to give closing remarks, and I'm very honored to do that. Thank you, Kevin. And I'm sorry my dad couldn't be here to know that there was all of this celebration and attention and acknowledgement of the wrongdoings that were happening and the justice that people who were involved in this tried to bring forward. So breaking the law in order to remove files from an FBI office wasn't something my dad took lightly. But he saw no other means of exposing criminal actions that he and others suspected that the FBI was responsible for. This is what civil disobedience is about: to expose injustices of powerful institutions when they aren't functioning in a just or right way. His motivation behind the FBI action had everything to do with bringing justice and oversight to an errant government agency that was seriously misbehaving. Margaret Talbot wrote a little piece in the New Yorker, I think right after this came out, and in it she said very clearly, sometimes you have to break the law in order to reveal more profound injustices. To have this historical marker placed here is pretty special. And I'll close by giving a huge thank you to all of the people involved for making this event a reality today. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you all for allowing this to happen. And thank you, burglars.
But a last minute thanks. I forgot to thank Betty Metzger again because she actually helped with the wording on the sign today. And also to Stacy Olkowski, Media Arts Council, everyone who helped coordinate all the events that'll happen right after we pull the cover off. So if I forgot anyone, thank you so much, and I thank you for getting wet for about 30 minutes. So let's reveal the marker. So we are here in the Philip Green and Son building. We're on the second floor here in the county court apartments. This is where the former FBI office was that the members of the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI burgled on March 8th, 1971. On this night, they took thousands of files that were located in these offices here. They were looking for documentary evidence that the FBI was spying on American citizens. So they did find that evidence. They sent it out to the press. And what we have now is a little more oversight by Congress on our federal law enforcement agencies to try to curtail these illegal surveillance practices. So a lot of history in these rooms, and we're so happy that we could have the burglars back here to commemorate this with us.